here is Diana Adams, Esquire, who is a sexual civil rights attorney who believes that the word family extends beyond the traditional nuclear family of mom, dad, 2 kids, and a dog to include other loving, mutually supporting families. Ms. Adams is active in the marriage reform movement, fighting to unbundle our rights from marriage so that single people, unmarried couples, polyamorous people, LGBTQ people who are not permitted to marry, and intentional communities are not legally disadvantaged in terms of their taxes or ability to form family ties. Diana is one of the contributors to the State of Sexual Freedom in the United States 2011 report. Diana.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here to talk to you about sexual freedom as it relates to family policy. So as we know, the right of same-sex couples to marry has become the priority issue of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender movement, receiving an overwhelming amount of the financial resources and energy of this LGBT activist community. On the opposite side of the political spectrum, we've heard all about the pro-marriage family values campaigns, championing marriage as a solution for myriad social ills and problems among children. As a civil rights issue, of course, same-sex couples need the right to legally marry, and I fully support marriage equality. And for all of you out there who are happily married, I think that's wonderful too, and respect the dignity and beauty of those relationships. But we need to also keep in mind the freedom not to marry and the freedom to build families of our choosing. Plenty of people, for instance, may want to build legal families with people with whom they're not in romantic relationships. We need these other family options beyond marriage because we need the freedom to create legal families whether or not the government approves of our sexual relationships. Sexual freedom means freedom from entering into sexual relationships out of economic duress, and that's not a reality for many American women who are pushed into marriage as a means of economic support today. Let's look at the same-sex marriage movement. Some say that gay sexuality has somehow gone from the jail cell to the courthouse doors to the bars of the picket fence. What I mean by this is that marriage is often a way for state and religion to sanction sexual relationships, historically to control and organize us into lifelong monogamous pairings with procreation as the focus of our sexuality. Buying into this marital image makes queerness safer, more vanilla and palatable. We're not leather daddies, America. We don't want to have group sex. We just want to fall in love for a lifetime, go to your church, buy an SUV, and be just like you. This de-emphasizes lesbian and gay sex and screens this non-normative sexuality out of the public eye. Marriage, in some ways, renders gay sex invisibly private, presumptively normative, and much less threatening. This is appealing and in many ways an effective political strategy to help normalize homosexuality. And creating more mainstream cultural acceptance is, of course, important. Many homosexual couples want this nuclear family picket fence ideal, but we also need to remember a long-term vision and include a queer culture of the critique of marriage as well as a parallel strategy. Gay or straight, what if you don't want a nuclear family or a traditional monogamous marriage? Or what if you want to have a committed relationship but make your own rules about monogamy or how you share finances? Right now, we have few other legal options. Those who marry are rendered sexually acceptable culturally at the expense of others, and the unmarried also miss out on the legal benefits of marriage. The premise of the fight for same-sex marriage is that marriage is a very privileged status, legally, economically, and socially, and it is discrimination for same-sex couples to be left out of it. But including same-sex couples in marriage prevents the line of discrimination from occurring at sexual orientation, but just pushes that line of discrimination back to marital status. Rather than crowd more categories of people into the sanctioned sexual relationship of marriage in order to get these benefits, such as 3 people in a polyamorous relationship, I advocate for government to get out of the business of adjudicating which sexual relationships are acceptable enough to get legal status and benefits, and let us form legal partnerships whether or not we're in romantic relationships. Let's look at the current state of marriage in the US. As I've said, marriage is the defining unit of legal family. Our government has a long-standing and explicit policy objective of trying to get its citizens married. There are over 1,000 provisions of federal law that treat married couples differently than any other status, usually preferentially. Many of us might be disturbed to learn that unlawful cohabitation statutes, still exist in 5 states, making it illegal to live with a partner without getting married. How many of us live with a partner without getting married? I do. Florida, Michigan, Mississippi, North Carolina, and Virginia still have these statutes on the books. Although criminal charges in these cases are rare, these statutes are regularly used against non-married couples in child custody cases, which I'm involved with, employment situations, housing, and parole, to openly be able to discriminate against non-married people because they're technically breaking the law. In addition to all of the legal consequences of being unmarried, marriage is also the ultimate merit badge of adulthood. It signifies success and stability. We celebrate weddings, whether or not we think the relationship is healthy or not. I just met this man 2 weeks ago and we're getting married. Congratulations! Let me send a gift. However, despite all of this, in 2011, fewer than 50% of American adults are actually married. Does this mean that the majority of Americans do not have a family? Family could actually be defined beyond that sexual romantic relationship, more broadly, to be people in a committed relationship, committed to providing caretaking for each other, such as for infants or the elderly, committed to providing economic support and financial dependency, sharing resources and love, and building a family together. Perhaps that family consists of a group of single friends living together collectively, or 2 single women choosing to live together and support each other while raising children, living with an elderly relative and providing care for them, or seniors living together in support of each other like the Golden Girls. These people may consider themselves to be part of a family, but generally are not receiving the subsidies of health insurance, tax benefits, immigration status that married couples receive. Our law does not encourage or subsidize these non-marital family forms. We experience a prohibition of pleasure in American family policy because family law is focused more on confining our sexuality to the marital relationship than on actually supporting the families that exist in America, these caretaking relationships among dependents. We need to reform law so that it values and supports our families rather than confining our sexuality. And in fact, the institution of marriage is used as part of our welfare state in America, creating a means of providing for the financial needs of health insurance and support of children and their caretakers through a family breadwinner. Whether marrying couples realize it or not, in many states, from the date of your marriage until the filing of divorce papers or death, all money earned, property purchased, or debt incurred is divided evenly between both married spouses, unless they contract around this. This is the most important contract people ever sign, yet many of us don't know this fine print. As a divorce attorney, I work with people when they're dismayed later on. Is marriage effective as a privatized social welfare state? No. The largest group of people in poverty in America by far are single mothers and their children, more than addicts, the mentally ill, or physically disabled people. Over 1/4 of American kids live with a single parent at any time, and a half of US kids will live with a single parent at some point, usually a single mom. According to a Census Bureau data on 2010 poverty release this week, 42% of single mother households are below the poverty line of $13,000 a year for a mother and child. 37% are counted as food insecure, meaning they are without reliable access to food due to extreme poverty. Single mother families are 75% of homeless families. Marriage is failing dramatically as a privatized social welfare state. Quality childcare is not affordable on one minimum wage salary, and it's not even intended to be. So what's Congress's solution to this crisis of single motherhood poverty then? Have we created other means of social welfare state support for mothers outside of marriage? Have we made childcare more affordable? Have we offered universal health care? No, in fact, our tax dollars have gone to fund promotion of marriage to single mothers on welfare as the way they're supposed to support themselves when they get off of welfare. The Healthy Marriage Initiative and the Responsible Fatherhood Program were created in 2005. Grants totaling nearly $750 million were awarded in 2006 alone through the welfare program to billboards promoting marriage, to pamphlets and counseling encouraging marriage, often coming from a Christian perspective. This is the state saying, if you want money to pay your rent and feed your kids, you should get married. You should get into a sexual relationship with a man who will support you. Come on, lower your standards. You're desperate. Squint a little. Squint a little. He's not so bad. How hungry are your children? Congress promoting marriage as a state solution to poverty for single mothers is our government acting as a pimp, coercing poor women coercing poor women into sexual relationships for financial support is a violation of human rights. Our sexual relationships should not be linked to our basic economic security. In a major victory in 2010, Congress ended this welfare funding for marriage promotion, largely due to the work of the Alternatives to Marriage Project and groups like this. Still, the crisis of single motherhood poverty is increasing without other strong solutions. And not only are women coerced into sexual relationships as a means of financial support, but sexual relationships may not even be the best way to create stable, legal financial partnerships. Our government creates explicit incentives to get married, like health insurance, tax benefits, in the thought that marriage will definitely create stable families for children. However, how many of you know someone who's gotten married for health insurance? Rushing into living with a romantic partner or getting married out of economic practicality is not a way to create stable families. In fact, think of it this way. If a single woman wants to have children or share a bank account with someone and create a stable family unit, she could do that with her sister, or somebody whom she's very close to, a best friend of 20 years, or a guy she met at a bar last week. Right now, she couldn't make that legal partnership with a sister, but is encouraged to do that with a guy she just met and has lots of sexual chemistry with. Studies consistently show that family instability is harmful to children, meaning instability of parental figures entering and leaving a child's life. Yet, these studies often report the problem as the marital status of the parents rather than this instability more generally. For instance, there was a very widely publicized study released this past August claiming that the children of unmarried cohabitating parents are at tremendous risk for a range of serious problems, including academic trouble, physical abuse, psychological stress, and poverty. This was reported in mainstream publications from NPR to the New York Times. What we didn't hear in those news reports was that these studies were conducted and funded by the National Marriage Project and the Institute for American Values, conservative organizations with the explicit and biased mission of defending the traditional institution of marriage. So while we do seem to have evidence that children of unmarried cohabitating parents fare worse, correlation does not indicate causation. The study did not account for the socioeconomic marriage gap in America, with lower income Americans less likely to marry, as lower income men are less likely to be able to be breadwinners right now. Children of poor families fare worse, but this is less likely caused by whether their parents possess a marriage certificate, by the fact that they're in poverty. Christopher Ryan, the author of Sex at Dawn, recently referred to the marital industrial complex. I would define this marital industrial complex as this system of incentives created by the state to push marriage, which are influenced by religious forces, combined with a corporate culture that doesn't take responsibility for providing the social welfare for citizens, and bolstered by many biased studies such as this one, which always seem to come back to the conclusion that the monogamous married nuclear family is the only healthy and natural family form, despite the fact that the majority of Americans aren't in this family form. But as a culture, we're finally starting to notice that the emperor isn't wearing any clothes. We have a tremendous rise in public conversation about infidelity problems in supposedly monogamous relationships, as well as responsible monogamy alternatives such as polyamory. In these high-profile celebrity infidelity scandals, the unfaithful are often demonized, called a sex addict. But it begs the question, is our mythology of monogamy a reality or an unrealistic ideal for many people? Although infidelity is older than monogamy, we claim monogamy is the only path, although many can't accomplish it. In the model of prohibition, with no acceptable means to express sexual desires outside of monogamy, these desires are driven underground to the unhealthy result of cheating and dishonesty. But public conversation about honest, responsible, non-monogamous alternatives such as polyamory have received massive media attention in mainstream press in the past few years. In 2010, the national bestseller Sex at Dawn by Dr. Christopher Ryan addressed the anthropological underpinnings of human sexual behavior, documenting that monogamy is not the natural state of human sexuality, and that, like vegetarianism, they argue, monogamy is a choice for humans that's against their nature, which will require lots of discipline and may be much more difficult for some people than others. So in this cultural landscape, we're hearing a lot more from sexual outlaws. It's becoming more difficult to maintain the argument that monogamy is the only healthy relationship style. And our next step in cultural evolution towards sexual freedom and away from sexual shame may be to acknowledge relationship choice, that each person should be able to honestly negotiate their sexual needs and desires with their partner and move away from a one-size-fits-all approach to sex and committed relationships. We don't have solid data on the number of people who identify as non-monogamous or polyamorous, but it does seem to be on a dramatic rise. And polyfamilies are sometimes left in a legal bind when they want to create stable legal relationships. In my law practice, I work with non-traditional families, including polyamorous families and people who want to co-parent together who are not in a romantic relationship. I work to help people create family contracts through mediation, which are often emotional covenants on paper, set down to make sure everyone's intentions are clear and everyone's on the same page, even if they might not yet be enforceable in court, such as an intention for 3 people to share resources as a household and to co-parent. But I hope that they're legally solid enough that they have a chance to change law if brought to court. I assist families in creating means of legal stability, such as forming LLCs or guardianships for children. Many of these people also face tremendous challenges in child custody cases. We used to see a lot of cases in which sexually active hetero moms and lesbian and gay parents were accused of being inappropriate parents because of their sexuality. And now we're seeing this happening often with polyamorous people, people who are into kink and BDSM, or sexually active non-married parents. We're seeing a lot of people accused of sex addiction. And there's a slippery slope between the actual disorder of hypersexual disorder, which will be included in the DSM in 2013, which is a pretty extreme disorder. Excessive time spent on sexual fantasies and urges, despite the fact that it's harmful to yourself and others and you can't control it, although you've tried. Instead, we're seeing sex addiction applied more generally to people who are in non-traditional sexual relationships or people who are unable or unwilling to be monogamous. This is very dangerous because in child custody cases, the decisions are made by one judge based on the best interest of the child. What is that? That's very subjective. So people lose custody of their kids in these situations. I work on these cases throughout New York State and consult on them nationwide, and I could tell you the prognosis of a case based on zip code and that zip code's voting status, because conservative places don't support non-traditional parents in these situations. We need to support healthy parents who are also poly and kinky in these situations, and my strategy is often to find sex-positive forensic psychologists to examine parents and refocus away from the scandal of sexuality to parenting. And we need more data on the number of healthy adults into kink and polyamory with more positive psychological research. Moving forward, how can we unbundle sexual relationships from financial dependency and support caretaking relationships more generally? Platonic family relationships are an option, and some of the most innovative solutions have occurred in states that can't push for same-sex marriage because they have a Defense of Marriage Act in their state constitution, like Utah. In Salt Lake City, there is a wonderful model of adult designee in which you can appoint any one person to be in a committed relationship with you and share your health insurance benefits. So if I were in Salt Lake City, I could put my sister or my best friend on my health insurance and all of her children without having to be in a sexual relationship. There are lots of other creative state and city domestic partner policies which allow, for instance, elderly sisters or people who are not in a romantic relationship to make legal partnership. What we need to watch is that we don't lose these options when same-sex marriage passes. For instance, in Hawaii, there's a reciprocal beneficiary relationship program which is only eligible to people who are not married. If same-sex marriage passes in Hawaii, which we hope it will, this option will not be possible. We need to keep in mind that we can have a parallel strategy of non-romantic legal partnerships as well as same-sex marriage. And the LGBT movement must not continue to fall victim to conservative arguments that marriage is the only healthy way to form family. Because so far in legal cases, the LGBT side has often called marriage a fundamental human right, the highest form of adult expression, the best family situation for children. In other countries such as Switzerland and France, they offer several options for creating legal partnership beyond romantic relationships. So in sum, we need a real separation of church and state in family policy, finally. Our government needs to get out of the business of issuing marriage licenses based on which sexual relationships meet their standard of acceptability, because this is a coercive prohibition of pleasure. When we are no longer pushed into the sexual relationship of marriage for economic security, and government values the families that exist rather than the families they wish we were in, we'll actually take a major step closer to sexual freedom.